Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Tom Kline is with us from Better Vantage Point, here to talk about a lot of things that have been on the radar. And also another industry expert, Michael Semanie, is with us. Tom and Michael, welcome. Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you, Ted. Great to be here. Michael, welcome.
You very much.
We'd like to welcome Mike Semanie of Semanie Law. Michael has offices in Florida, New Jersey, and New York, specializing in car dealer law. And so we are excited to have Michael here, Ted, and appreciate his being here to discuss what everyone is talking about, which is the FTC's new regulations. There's lots to unpack here, and we have some insights, I think, that will really help. So first I'll say welcome to Michael.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, great. So let's dive right in here. So I don't want to focus so much on the compliance side today, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. We want to talk about three different things, three different separate problems that dealers are facing they may not realize. Number one is consumer issues are still going to drive lawyers and regulators. And starting in the early 2000s, I think, for a quick introduction, that was kind of the rise of consumerism. And that followed with regulatory actions and, of course, plaintiff lawyers. But now, as of earlier in April, when the FTC came on the NADA webinar, they encouraged dealers to turn each other in if they're not following the new regulations. That opens up Lanham Act claims potentially, where dealers sue other dealers for falsely advertising. So we have a lot to discuss here. And if you had anything you wanted to share from kind of an opening perspective before I jump into some questions, we'd love to hear from you.
I think your points are well taken. It's definitely a bit of a new frontier, right? It's kind of old law and old regulations rehashed under new interpretations. And so we want to make sure dealers are understanding what those new obligations are and what some new opportunities may be for them to be able to continue to do business safely.
Okay, and so give us your top three things for starters on what dealerships should do to operate safely from these three very distinct perils. Tell us your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, the one that's obviously is at the top of the list is dealer advertising, and that's been something that we have. I've probably been doing dealer seminars and dealer get-togethers and speeches and talks and everything for about a decade and a half, and wow. That's always an issue. Dealer advertising has always been an issue. It's just now that it's at the forefront. It's not something where people can't really say anymore, well, I haven't been caught yet, and I'm going to keep doing it. The magnifying glass is out. So the FTC, other regulatory agencies and private consumer plaintiffs are looking at this. That's one of the things that I think is important for dealers to understand is these issues are not just FTC level issues, right? I've had several dealers and if you're in a middle size or smaller dealer group, maybe saying, look, the eyes aren't on me. It's the Federal Trade Commission. They're looking at the big guys. Well, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, if it was true, that doesn't mean that you're out of the woods. What we see happen more often than not is you see these big splashes on the news about what the FTC is doing, and that trickles down then to states' attorneys general who are saying, we have similar, we have mini FTC acts here in each state, and we're going to enforce them the same way because we want to be able to show our constituents that we are hard on, consumer misleading, consumer deception, all these things. And that then trickles down to private plaintiffs' attorneys who under most mini FTC acts under state law does provide for a private cause of action, unlike the federal FTC Act.
Right. So I'm going to say, so my business, as you know, is part compliance and part risk mitigation. The risk mitigation lesson here that you just mentioned is don't have unhappy consumers who are going to regulators. And while that sounds super easy, like we satisfy all our customers, What I see in my practice is that sales managers or general managers have this mentality of we did nothing wrong legally. They think they're lawyers. We did nothing wrong. And therefore, because they didn't do anything wrong, they're not going to satisfy the customer. And it's my belief. I don't. This is an opinion, and I like to separate facts from opinions. My opinion is that the FTC went to all the state attorneys general
Okay.
and said, "Give me your stinkiest dealers who don't satisfy their customers," and that's how the list of 97 was generated. Uh,
Oh.
that's my opinion. Now,
That's been and by the way, that's been a question in the industry, gentlemen, is how did they come about with this number? Who are the dealers? How were they identified? That's definitely been a point of
and,
discussion.
and that my opinion is, and I talked to a state motor vehicle board this week and said, what's going on essentially, and they said we're getting flooded with customers. We're getting 100 a week. This is in one state. We're getting more than 100 a week. This is a state regulator. And that's because dealers, in this particular state are not doing a good job satisfying their customers. Now, I just want to be clear, satisfying customers doesn't mean you have to give the store away. Doesn't mean you have to give them everything that they're asking for. It means you have to have a meeting of the minds and sit down and both parties be satisfied. But and that's how I think the list of 97 came up. So, Mike, let's talk about advertising, since that's where we're on. The standard is now clear and conspicuous. Are most dealers even close to meeting that standard at this point in time?
No, I mean, I would say not even close. I mean, I can tell you from what we've done, sort of informal little surveys of uh, not dealer clients, but just looking at dealership websites, and seeing how dealers are advertising their inventory. Um, I can tell you in Florida, it's one of the bigger problems because some
Mm.
states there's and let me back it up to explain why. So some states regulate what you can charge for a dealer fee or a doc fee or whatever you want to
Yes.
give to that fee, and they
Right.
regulate either a cap on it, which might be pretty low, maybe $100 and something dollars. Some other states regulate in different ways. In Florida and some other states, there's no cap. It is basically you disclose it and you charge whatever you want to charge. And so the number can grow to be pretty decent sized fee. And
Was
that
it
is where
1,200, $1,300, right? 14,
easily,
15? Yeah.
easily,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then you add to
Michael, I
that,
remember when I sold cars, the fee was $19 and it went up to 39. Everybody complained. Sorry.
it's it has grown. It may have outpaced inflation. That is true. The and that but that's where the problem comes in, is because you have someone that is, let's say there's two dealers side by side and they're both pick an OEM, whatever franchise they are, and one is complying with the law, and meaning they're saying here's my price for this vehicle, and we got two identical vehicles, but this one has the dealer fee built in, the electronic registration filing fee built in, all of the hard ads, the options that are included in the vehicle that you're not going to be able to get out of. Those are all in there. It doesn't have reductions for rebate stacking, a bunch of rebates that you're not going to qualify for all of them, right? So that price is going to be much different than the price of your neighboring dealer, who is offering a different price, and that's the concern. Is that, well, look, if I can at this point choose one of two things. I can be legally compliant,
Okay.
or I can be competitive. And so, how do I choose between those? And that's where it becomes an issue. And that's where some of these other, issues of, like you mentioned, the Lanham Act, you mentioned the FTC saying, hey, guys, we're going to listen to you if you talk about some of your competitors coming in with different, advertising practices. That's a real issue for dealers. It's because it's no longer either comply or don't comply. You have to add this other angle to it of competition.
And so tell the dealers what a step or two they can take to try to protect themselves from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, that one of the big things is starting over and looking at your advertising again. Let's start fresh, blank page, because even though we are talking about the FTC Act Section 5, and we're talking about state laws that may have similar requirements, we're looking at under a new standard. And so let's go back and look at not only, the way you're advertising, on your website, but let's look about how you're doing that with some of the other vendors, whether it's your text vendors. When you're sending something out, you have a watch list or something along those lines that's saying, here's the price of the vehicle. Well, is that the price? I don't know. Your Google ads, are you pulling from, sources in your DMS that gives you the price that you're supposed to be advertising? Does it aggregate the purchase price with, these other items that are supposed to be now included with it? These are all issues that you need to really kind of go back at and look at it from a stand back perspective. Let's look at it from a 30,000 foot view. How are we complying? What is our policy? How are we making sure that we're complying? Those are all things. And I know, Tom, you audit stores all the time. And, if you had 2 or 3 things that you're going to look for, let's say you have a compressed time period that says, hey, you got 30 minutes, look at my store, go. What are some of the things that you look at for that?
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is mystery shop the store, right? I'm going to look at I'm going to try to put on a clean pair of glasses, and then pretend I'm a shopper, and see what happens. I mean, my wife and I were recently shopping for a vehicle. I clicked on an ad for a Kia that was $48,000, and when I landed on the dealership website, it was $52,000. Just from the click to the store, there was a $4,000 difference. I mean, so you've gotta look and see, what's happening. I mean, a dealer called me and said, just tell me in one sentence what this new regulation means. And I said, don't be a jerk. if you're a jerk, you're going to get caught, right? We can talk about what deceptive is. We can talk about all kinds of the buzzwords of what the FTC is looking at. If you're a jerk, you're not doing it right, right? And it's the same reason that StubHub and Live Nation and all these and Express Scripts, the FTC, as the Trump administration has become more populist, right? We're not talking about Reagan's Republicans. We're talking about Trump Republicans. And as they become more populist, they're interested in what the little guy thinks, which is why there's been such a focus on deceptive pricing. Nobody likes to buy a ticket and have a convenience fee of $60 tacked on the end when it's neither convenient nor helpful. And like I talked to somebody on the phone this morning, they have their StubHub, their Live Nation, and their Major League Baseball apps, and they forget when they buy their tickets, and it's hard to go on all of them and figure it all out. But whoever has the least fees is where he shops. So, I mean, mystery shopping or having a documented process, I would also say, Michael, is really important. Like, do you have a point person at the dealership who is going to look at your sales agent's social media posts before they go up? Because if they're posting pricing for vehicles, that's got to include the processing fee and any other hard ads that you might have up front.
Wow.
And are they going to take them down after they sell that car? Right? You have to have a process for all that. So that's where I start and say, we got to install a process here for whatever works for your dealership, and make sure that it's auditable and that we document all this so that if anybody ever comes in, we can say, hey, look, we made a mistake on this one, but don't say to us that we're not trying to comply. Okay. I think that's where it really starts. What other landmines do you see dealers stepping on right now in relation to this?
Well, I mean, the forefront has been dealer advertising, but there are other issues that are involved here, and that's actually where, I think some of the, what you said, the interaction with customers, meaning let's not be a jerk. That's all a big part of it. One of the things that we usually see, and this is, I mean, I'll tell you, this probably comes up more often than not. We talked about how something goes from a complaint to the FTC or a complaint to the state attorney general, or trickle down to a private plaintiff's attorney. More often than not, those consumers are going to those authorities for something different than what the actual case is. We've seen it where I've had a plaintiff's attorney just be very candid with me and say they're really upset that they were told they were going to get floor mats and they didn't get floor mats. And so they came to me and said, I want my floor mats. And the attorney says, well, look, we can talk about floor mats, but let's look at their documents. Let's look at their advertising. Let's look at these other things. So to your original point, if you can, head that off at the pass, meaning it's something where you can make the customer satisfied about an issue that's not even related to some of these things, that can really go a long way to avoiding some of these issues that we're seeing right now. And that's where, I think getting the processes in place to where they don't get missed, right? If there's a customer complaint, how are we dealing with it? How do we not let that go? Because when it gets let go, that's when some of these things happen. So I know you deal a lot with processes with dealers.
Right.
Where do you see sort of some of those processes coming in, and where there's gaps in the processes that create some potential liability?
Yep. So two things. Number one, I had a phone call last year where a dealership said a plaintiff attorney took out a billboard that's right behind our dealership and said, if you're not satisfied and had an arrow with your experience, call me. So
I think that was here in Jersey. I think I saw that here.
it happens.
It's something that could happen in this area. I'm sorry.
It absolutely does. I mean, I know this happened. Having Michael, to answer your question is if you do have policies, which a lot of stores don't, even the big ones,
Yeah.
Even some of the publics don't have the standardization that you would think that they would have. The first thing is have a policy. The second thing is train. Are you training on that policy? The book that I'm trying to finish is called The 10-Minute Tuck, because Tuck the Octopus. It's better to train than explain. And if you're not training and having employees sign off on that important documentation, where you can say, hey, we may have screwed up this one customer and we'll fix this one customer, but here's our January training, here's our February training, here's our March training, right? It doesn't have to be a seance and we all sit around and spend 3 hours and 10 minutes is all it needs to be, right? You just need to do it. And so
Michael and Tom, it sounds like, if I'm a dealer, if I may, and if I'm addressing it and actually making steps towards training, towards, documented processes, documenting that the employees attended the training. I mean, that's part of it right there. All right. That, a dealer is making the steps to make amends, if you will, Tom, right?
That's right. I mean, it's interesting because in the sentencing guidelines, when somebody's getting criminally sentenced, it's interesting that the presence of a, quote, robust compliance program is to be considered in the sentencing, Ted.
Wow.
So if there's white collar crime going on, is there a robust compliance program? And the judges are required to take that into consideration. So having processes, and the last step is auditing those processes, right? Just having them and saying, well, we've got a process, but I've never looked at it, and then I haven't documented it. That's not helpful. It's just, in fact, you can get hung. You can get hung up more, and Michael can speak to this when I'm done. If you have a policy but you don't follow it, you're going to get barbecued if you have it and you don't follow it. Am I right, Michael?
Oh, 100%. And you see it explicitly in some laws. Like, and I'll give you an example under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, the TCPA, which is, it had a little bit of a lull for a while. It's coming back, and a lot of dealers are being sued for that now. There's a big difference between a regular violation, $500 per call, text, whatever it is, and a willful and knowing violation, $1,500 per call or text. And the first thing that a plaintiff's attorney is going to say is, well, what do you mean it's not willing and knowing and willful? You have a policy that says you know how to do it. You chose to do it wrong. That's pretty compelling evidence. We want to avoid that. So we want to. It's great. Yes, I agree. You have to have policies. Training is that next step to make sure the policies are implemented the way they're supposed to be, because that is as important as having the policy. The policy is basically a dead letter if you're not actually doing something with it. And that's another area where I think is important for dealers to understand. under the FTC Act, there is potential individual liability as well. So, like if a dealer has somebody in the dealership, and whether it's management, whether it's ownership, whoever, have dealership structure these differently, but someone that really is saying, signing off on the advertising, there's a
Right.
potential for individual liability for that person as well, not just the dealership entity,
Really?
but the person. So, these things are, oh yeah, yeah. If you look at some of the FTC orders, they very frequently
Wow.
have individuals named as defendants, and that's significant.
What Michael's talking about is absolutely the truth, and it is to be considered. One last point on what you just said, Michael, was some of the F&I providers will provide
Yes.
policies as a part of what they do for the dealerships. I would encourage the dealers to read those policies before you implement them, because oftentimes the way they're phrased is not how the dealer is actually doing things. So those documents are meant to be templates. They're not meant to be the be all end all. And I see that often when I go in and say, well, let me see your Equal Credit Opportunity Act policy. And they give it to me, and it's not something that's being done properly.
So, gentlemen, in the time we have left, what advice? Here we are, middle of May, middle of the second quarter. This has been in the news now for quite a bit of time. Dealers have been reading about it, hearing from their peers, talking at 20 groups, maybe talking to their state association, council, and so on. What what should what advice? What I shouldn't say advice. What should dealers start looking at and preparing for to be proactive in this area? Tom, and then Michael, if you would, to bring it home.
Sure. I mean, compliance is 50% of the total work here. The other part is the risk mitigation, which is at least 50%, which
Yeah,
is, again, what are you doing about your customer complaints? What policies can you put in place to make sure that the customers don't go to the FTC? If they do go to the FTC, do you have insurance that will cover that? In other words, the risk mitigation side is equally as important as the compliance side. And smart dealers, the ones I'm getting calls from, are the ones who are focused on both areas. So that's my short answer. I have, of course, a 1 week answer to that question,
yes.
and a 20 step roadmap to make sure that everything is in good shape. But
Okay.
that's my 60-second answer. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's dealers can't feign surprise at this point. This is as widely publicized as anything has been in the past
Yeah.
that I can remember. So and meaning you can't feign surprise when you start to see more FTC enforcement actions, when you start to see more state attorney general actions, when you start to see more private plaintiff lawsuits against dealers, and and then the other thing that we mentioned at the beginning, don't be surprised if you start seeing competitor lawsuits under the Lanham Act, where one dealer is saying, "Hey, you're competing unfairly against me because you're advertising a false price where I have to advertise the correct price." So all these things are coming for sure. It's a matter of making sure that you're protecting yourself to not be, in the crosshairs when it does.
All right. We'll leave it there. Great insights, gentlemen. Thank you for helping us be aware of some of the ins and outs here. I did not realize a lot of these things, and I'm sure our audience is realizing them now for the first time as well. Michael, thank you for all you do for the industry.
Well, thank you very
Uh,
much.
Semanie Law, okay. I know I visited your website. You're on the web. I've seen it
That's
there
right.
with your picture as well. So you mentioned Florida and also New York and New Jersey. Okay,
Yes.
are
Yeah, we have
those
offices in all three.
all right? All right, very good. Great friend of the industry, Michael, and Tom Kline at Better Vantage Point. Tom, you've got a roadmap, and you can help dealers, I guess, be proactive and take a look at what they need to address as part of what you do.
Right. Thanks for having us, Ted.
All right,
Thank you
Tom
so
and
much.
Michael, very eye-opening. Thank you, and shocking in many ways. But you know what? It's better to know it now and be ahead of the curve, right? So, thank you for that ounce of prevention. So, Tom Kline, everybody, Better Vantage Point, and Michael Semanie with Semanie Law here with us today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.